person who started it was, he had been a defrocked Christian and Missionary Alliance pastor, lost his church over, it's a controversy over how he lost his church, but I think it was probably having to do with sex.
Talking about Berg?
Berg, yeah.
Yeah, David Berg.
So, and he had this, vision of just molding young lives into something that was, it's him. It would be unstoppable if you had a bunch of committed people that were willing to go anywhere and do anything and share the gospel. We'd take over the world. In the meantime, if you happen to be a narcissist, what a setup.
David Berg, very interesting backstory, to say the least. His upbringing with his parents, how he was raised. I think his mother was the first Christian evangelist in the United States.
Yeah,
and was doing all kinds of insane things, proclaimed to have divine healing powers.
She was a big part of the healing movement, yeah.
Yeah. And he didn't really succeed at anything until he was like in his 50s. And that's when he started the Children of God in like Huntington Beach, I think, right?
Yeah. I think he was part of his mom's evangelistic team, played piano, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he wasn't really a well-known preacher or anything.
And when he was from what I understand, when he was a young child, he had a very traumatic childhood where his parents would shame him for like weird, like normal, what most people would consider normal sexual proclivities of kids going through puberty or things like this. And they would like threaten him with like chopping off his dick and like doing weird things with him and his sisters and watching him like when he was a kid, like lots of weird early programming that happened to him from his parents in his early childhood.
Folks who have done psychological studies on Berg, always comment on the bizarre nature of, it's not even all that bizarre when it comes to the evangelical world. A lot of very strict fundamentalists approach child rearing and sexuality that way. But I think it probably was more extreme in his case. And given the nature of he thought about sex a lot. So it probably was a big problem for him growing up.
Yeah.
But
what just typically, that's the story of the Catholic schoolgirl.
Yeah.
Right? You tell them that they can't look at boys, they can't touch boys until they're married, and they end up being they end up being the biggest slut in high school.
I'm a Catholic school kid.
You tell a kid
that lucky.
You tell a kid they're forbidden from something. It's just going to make them want more of it.
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah. No. His story is not that different from many other people who grew up in that tradition.
Yeah.
But his reaction to it was extreme. So he internalized a lot of stuff, and over time, I think as a traveling evangelist, people have opportunities to sleep with people that they're not married to. It just happens. It's not unique to cults. It's all over. And I'm sure he engaged in that, and along the way, he also got really involved with one of his daughters. And so that was we didn't know any of this. It wasn't advertised, or many, many years later it came out. But so he had already begun crossing the line into sex with minors.
This was before he started the cult.
Right. I think Berg was making it up as he went. He may have had some sort of a blueprint in his. He may have.
At what point did you meet him?
I met him in Texas.
A few times. Early on. Okay.
Yeah, he was charismatic, a bit spooky. I wasn't used to anybody of his demeanor. He wore dark sunglasses all the time, even at night. And the rumor was that the reason he did it is because he could see all your sins, and it freaked out new believers. So I don't know what the excuse was. Maybe it was bloodshot. I don't really know, but that's the air he would just kind of pop up when you weren't expecting him, and say something profound, and kind of throw you off guard. It was. I wasn't particularly attracted to him or repulsed by him. I was just fascinated because I never saw anyone like him.
Mysterious.
Yeah. So as time went on, to me it seems like if you give a guy with narcissistic personality disorder the attention that he was getting from these wildly enthusiastic, young, virile kind of young people, that kind of a crowd, he's going to do something with it eventually. If whether he was thinking about it in the original case or not, it morphed that way. So he started getting, concubines or whatever you want to, he had other girls with him from time to time, most of which we knew about one, but we didn't know about the others. So, and that was kind of kept hush-hush because it would freak us out. We were not allowed to make out with our betrothed, and he was messing around with other people's wives, so that leaked out later.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But he would slowly introduce ideas of more sexual freedom. We were pretty repressed, we were, like church Christians, but on steroids. We were really intense about everything. So he had to kind of steer us into a path where we'd be a little more liberated, skinny dipping, or, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But once he got into a place where he had several thousand followers all over the world and was living separate from any of the communities, he lived on his own, just he and his wife and a few helpers kind of thing. Then he had the liberty to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and it just got stronger and stronger. Mm. Then he got the bright idea that, maybe we should use our sexual energy and attractiveness to the public as a way of gaining recruits. Show them the love of God in a physical way, like you would feed them or take care of them if they're wounded or that kind of thing. And that's the way he built on it slowly. First, it was just a matter of don't be afraid to flirt, just to engage in a flirtatious type of conversation if it will help you draw that person into a deeper conversation and a longer conversation. Mm. And then it went from that where he started, he and his second wife were going to dance lessons in London and meeting all these lonely guys. And eventually she started hooking up with them as a way to give them the gospel. And they got a few recruits from that. And they thought, well, let's take this show on the road. So they launched a worldwide rollout of this new plan called Flirty Fishing, which I hope you don't have.
Flirty Fishing.
Yeah. And he got the bright idea that, maybe we should use our sexual energy and attractiveness to the public as a way of gaining recruits. Show them the love of God in a physical way, like you would feed them or take care of them if they're wounded or that kind of thing. And that's the way he built on it slowly. First, it was just a matter of don't be afraid to flirt, just to engage in a flirtatious type of conversation if it will help you draw that person into a deeper conversation and a longer conversation. Mm. And then it went from that where he started, he and his second wife were going to dance lessons in London and meeting all these lonely guys. And eventually she started hooking up with them as a way to give them the gospel. And they got a few recruits from that. And they thought, well, let's take this show on the road. So they launched a worldwide rollout of this new plan called Flirty Fishing, which I hope you don't have.
Flirty Fishing.
Yeah. Don't Google it.
Don't Google it? Why?
No, it's
they like drew manuals for this, right?
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's
they did like comic book style illustrations and manuals describing and teaching folks how to engage in the flirty fishing. And it was mainly the women who were doing this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, occasionally you might end up in a kind of a relationship with a person of the opposite sex if you're a male, but that wasn't the ticket, you know. So that's when things started getting really crazy because
How long were you in it before he introduced this flirty fishing stuff?
I was just trying to think about that, and I haven't visited the literature in a long time, but I'm thinking it was probably 6 or 7 years at least.
Okay.
Yeah, that stuff.
God's whores. Look at that.
So yeah, it's not something like I really brag about.
And when did he change his name to Moses?
What happened was it was an early article when they were on the road camping in state parks and buses and stuff. One of the guys came out and said, "This is like Moses and the children of Israel." So we got the name Moses and the children of God there. And then he later took, David was his original name, but he also takes on the character. He feels that he combines the anointing of the prophet Moses and the anointing of King David in one person as this great end time prophet, which we had a whole kind of theology about where in the Bible this speaks about this guy. But it's all patched together in a very weird way. Eventually,
interpretation.
Yeah. Most Bible scholars identify it as messianic, as Christ, but he had a way of twisting it into, this is me. And this is a new, the change will be as great as from the Old Testament to the New Testament, from the New Testament to the end time church. So the idea was this is going to be really a dramatic departure. And the central piece of what he was going for in it was this thing he called the law of love. And in it, he sort of said, it doesn't really matter. There's no right or wrong outside of love. You know, love is the whole key to doing, if you're doing it in love, it's good. So there were a few parameters, what would be loving and what wouldn't, but not many. And he took it further and further and further as time went on, and eventually started with his own. He wasn't having sex with his son, but his helpers were when he was just 2 years old, 3 years old. Just I don't think it was intercourse, but it was oral sex and that kind of thing.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah, it was really hard to take. I mean,
and how did you guys know about this?
They published it. They send out photos. They would touch up the photos so the adult could not be recognizable, but
they would distribute it to all the members.
To the members only. It wasn't something you'd hand out on the street, or you guarded it. You know, it was a very secretive thing. But it's so hard to say because to put myself back into my 26 or 27-year-old head, I now was married. I had another partner who was soon to become my wife. I had 7 kids. It was a real. I had 5 kids, and then I got 2 more real quick after that. But
with how many?
You're pretty committed.
Women?
I had 5 with my first wife, and then when we added another member, which a long story, but eventually it was not commonly practiced in the group, but it wasn't uncommon either. It was to have 2 wives was considered biblical simultaneously. Yeah. And it started out as the idea was they wanted to involve, there was too many Americans in the group. They wanted more international people. So if you were a leader, an American leader with an American wife, you had to take on another trainee or a partner. It didn't have to be a woman. It could be a man, whatever. But as a team that would be leadership in a 3-way kind of community. Well, if you start having sex and sharing, your bonds grow quite intense. It's not turn it on, turn it off. So we're pretty entangled.
Yeah.
I don't know. My wife has her convictions about what we're doing. I was starting to have some doubts. My best friend, who had been in the group as well, that I'd brought into the group, but he had become Mo's right-hand man. And part of my willingness to follow was the fact, well, if it's okay with Mike, things have got to be okay. I know he's not going to do something like that, that's wrong. So if he's convinced, I feel safe. But he ended up getting kicked out because he challenged. So that was a crisis for me. And so here I am. I was at the time a pretty big leader. I was over about, I don't know, probably a dozen countries, works all over. And all this kind of...
You were in charge of a dozen country groups in different countries?
You're right. So maybe, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 different communities, but spread all the way from Bangladesh to Greece and parts of North Africa. So it was a massive area. And, what did I know? All I knew was 19-year-olds education and the Bible and a very particular interpretation of the Bible.
Right.
So, but everyone around me, my wife, my kid, we're all involved in this thing that's kind of all-consuming. You don't have like outside friends and stuff, It's just your whole life is tied up in the community and committed to it. You're still experiencing miracles. I got to admit, they started getting less and less. As time went on, that miraculous aspect of our life became more strategic. We'd figure out, well, this works good. Let's try busking. Let's do this. Let's, different ways to raise money. FFing was one of them because people would be quite generous with people.
Flirty fishing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I felt a real change going on, and I got in trouble for having, I don't know, bad attitude or something. They just didn't think I was committed enough. I wasn't. I didn't have enough of the spirit of David, of our leader's spirit, to properly lead. So we got canned, and it was a big, a public denunciation and letters going to everyone in the world is reading about you and all these things. Some of them are making statements about what a jerk you are. It's a hard thing to go through. I was quite tempted at that point to just say, fuck this, I can't do this anymore. But it was my whole life, my wife, my kids, by this time 2 wives. It was, I couldn't emotionally allow myself to get strong enough on my conviction that this is wrong. I should leave. Because I knew it would probably cost me my family. I just didn't think my wife would come with me. We were living overseas. We had no money of our own, During the last 10 years or so that we were in the group, I was pretty much independent. I tried not to get into leadership again because it was a bummer. There was nothing good about it. But every once in a while I would, and then the crisis of conscience would come up. You can't do this. This is wrong. And the stuff with kids was getting much more serious, much more widespread. Thankfully, I can just...
known by people.
Yeah.
Known by all the members.
You had to know. It was part of the publications. It was part of the... it might not be happening in your home. It might not be happening in your location, but you knew it was happening. It was published everywhere, and you're always going to brush up against it somewhere. So that was a crisis for me. The group started having to change because, you can't get away with that stuff for indefinitely. Somebody's going to blow the whistle on you. So then we became much more of this, freaked out, draw the curtains.
Paranoid?
Yeah, paranoid. And we rent a house and have 20 people in it, but you'd think there were just 3 people living there, just going in and out in tinted vans, all this kind of, just a crazy way to live. Except we were all freaked out that they were going to take our kids away. Mm-hmm. So that was once it got so bizarre that I realized I am doing nothing for God here. All I'm doing is playing a role in this abusive organization. I have to get out. I hope they'll come, but I don't know. I don't know what they'll do. And that was a pretty big moment for me. They finally came out with some list of rules that was just so insane. I just said, wait, why don't you just tell us a list of the things we're allowed to do? Because it would be a lot shorter than the list of the things we're not allowed to do. Mm-hmm. So, and that blew up. Then I was in the doghouse, and next thing I knew, I was being invited to serve the Lord in some other capacity to lead the group.
How did you protect your kids from the abuse?
Well, you know, I don't like to discuss my own children's personal experiences, and it really depends on where you were, how old you were at the time that this particular activity got widespread within the group. There was, in my mind, clearly a handful of people who were just flat out pedophiles, just were having a field day. A lot of people who got into that activity did it with the believing, this is the way the logic went. If we already were sold on the fact that God created sex, it's good, it's beautiful, it's a gift. We also had crossed over, it's not only if you're married, you can share sexual love with other people in a beneficial and loving way. So once you're over that hump, then you think, well, the idea was in the Bible, people were, get betrothed at the age of 12. It was Mary was probably 12 years old.
Yeah.
So
and allegedly the apostles were children as well, or teenagers.
Yeah, some of them were. Some of them had kids, but it was the idea was, I forgot where I was going with that.
I was asking about how you protected your kids from some of the stuff.
So then once it opened up to the point where, kids can have sex when they're teenagers, and maybe an adult could have sex with a teenager in certain circumstances. Very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. I had teenage girls. It wasn't at all.
And this was writing. This was stuff that was written and given to you, or this was explained to you in person in like a meeting or something.
Both.
Okay.
Both. Yeah, it was not a secret. So I mean, you really can't say. I know some people who still kind of like, I never saw it. I didn't know what was going on. I don't believe that.
It was everywhere.
Unless you're willingly blind, you would know that this was going on. You might try to describe it in the idealized love, and there's really no difference between a child exploring sexuality and an adult, and maybe they can do it together, that kind of thing. And I think people got drawn into this idea that I have to educate my child sexually in a loving, manner, and introduce them to this. Well, I didn't like it at all. I was not a part of. I never had sex with a child or anyone underage at all. But it's a miracle. Honestly, it's very hard to imagine how I escaped from any situation, because of the places that I lived. There was an awful lot of it going on around, and some of my kids were affected by it. I won't, discuss the details of their situations. It's up to them to, and they do. They in their own world will express their challenges and difficulties overcoming the trauma of those kind of early exposures. Once we got out, it was in terms of the rest of the group, I think it really went. Berg himself, I do believe, was a pedophile. He was just an everything. He was just, just a dangerous, dangerous man. And I do think there were other people in the group who just had a field day with it, and they're very, very just selfish, just going after people that it was going to be hurtful, and they didn't care. But not everybody, and I know some people who got caught up in it who deeply regretted it and have recovered their bonds with their kids in a beautiful way, just by admitting they were just crazy, just went nuts in this whole thing. So, I got to say, my kids are remarkable in the way they've struggled through the issues of their upbringing, and found a way that they have certain strengths of character and of resilience that not too many people do. And so I got a lot of respect for him. And I had to apologize. I couldn't tell you how many times just for the stuff that we did, the stuff that went wrong, stuff that happened to them on my watch. I mean, it just shouldn't have happened at all. And it's not just my kids. It's, I don't know how many kids, but in the thousands of kids who in that window where this was part of the group's identity and practices and whatever age they were, depending on if they were preteens or teens or whatever, their experience and where they were. If they were in a central headquarters situation, bad news. If they were out in the field somewhere, maybe not. Maybe they didn't even it might not have come up. There was, I don't know if you're familiar with the whole Ricky Rodriguez thing.
I am, yeah. But you should explain it for people.
So 2005, just shortly after, shortly before my daughter passed away, Ricky.
Were you in 2005? Were you out?
Oh yeah, we'd been out for 15 years almost.
Okay.
But I was involved with a ministry called Meadowhaven, which was a transitional home for people coming out of high control groups, cults, and you could stay there for up to 6 months. And they had a counseling program and a lot of different ways to help people get back on track after being, 20 years in a cult or whatever.
Right.
But so we were involved. We're serving on the board of this ministry and trying to work, going to International Cultic Studies Association events where we would explain our past and try to get a deeper understanding of the dynamics. In ICSA, the International Cultic Studies Association, people get it. It doesn't, there are hundreds of different groups represented, but they get the same dynamic. It's like McDonald's or Taco Bell, different menu, but same standard operating procedure. So cults are that way. They just inevitably end up doing certain things the same. So they get the dynamic, and they get how warped your sense of right and wrong can become in that atmosphere. So, trying to think of why I was going there. 2005. Oh yeah. So, the kid, the child of
Ricky, right?
Ricky, he was a love child. Born to a guy from the Canary Islands, and Maria, who was the second wife of Berg.
Oh, Ricky was not Berg's wife? I'm sorry. Ricky wasn't Berg's son?
Not biologically, no.
Okay.
He was, a Spanish father.
Okay.
And he had left the group. It was very, very, you can imagine what he went through. Holy smokes. He's been publicly lauded all over the world by our group. He was the prince. He was the up and coming heir to the throne kind of thing. A lot of pressure, and it was obviously he was the experimental test case for all the sex stuff with kids.
The moment he was born, basically, he was abused sexually.
I think maybe 2 or 3, something like that. He was getting his diaper changed, so that's the kind of thing.
Christ.
So, and the idea, they published it all. It wasn't something like the Catholic Church or something. This is not done in a corner. It was not like secret, hide it, don't tell anybody. It was, no, this is great. This is the way God's love is meant to function. We're supposed to be all, utterly liberated in all ways.
So not only are they doing this to they're publicly they're bragging about it to everybody in the group
as a kind of a how-to manual. Kind of this is the way we suggest you raise your kids. So that's why it caught on so widespread. So anyway, he had no kid raised in the family had it easy, but he had it more difficult than almost anyone I can imagine. Just the amount of scrutiny and the amount of abuse and control. He got married. They left the group. He had become an electrician. He was severely troubled, just eaten alive, and constantly feeling like I got to do something to save my generation from the family. And he got it fixed in his brain that he was going to kill his mother and track her down. But he's living incognito. He didn't know where she was. Mm-hmm. And in the path of trying to find her, he ended up...
He made a video, right?
Yeah, he made a video.
He made a video talking about, and you can find this on YouTube, I think.
Yeah.
He's basically like, he has the knife and the gun, he's showing it off and talking about.
And you can see his demeanor is just, flat. He's not raging angry or anything. He's just cold. He's come to a place of a decision in his life, and he's ready to commit violence. And he's, like that weird peace when you make a decision, even if it's a really bad one. That's what the vibe that he carried on his tape. So after he...
Don't play the audio on this, Steve. Sorry, continue.
After he ended up... Well, he ended up finding one of Maria's assistants who was living, I forget why, but she was living on her own, and tracked her down and was trying to extract the information, where is my mother?
Right. And
was torturing her to do it, and ended up killing her. And then drove off into the desert and killed himself. So this was, I didn't know him well, but I knew him.
You met him?
Yeah, as a kid, and I had just come back from India, and I was visiting, David Berg and his headquarters situation in southern France. And he came over to hang out. I was just showing him pictures of India. He was so interested, oh, how did they do that? Ooh, what's that? I really liked him. He was a good kid and happy. He didn't seem to be, he was very comfortable with an adult company and stuff, So it was it hit me really hard, not because I was so emotionally connected to Ricky, but because he was a part of the cohort of my kids. So,
oh, wow.
It was just a total shock. So the entire second generation ex-member community, went ballistic over the whole thing. It was a website formed with a whole lot of very, very traumatic testimonies. When it first broke, ABC News wanted to do a little background piece on cults and the group. And so they contacted Bob Pardon, a friend of ours who runs the Meadowhaven Project, and said, do you know anyone from the Children of God? And he says, yeah, I'm not sure he'll want to, but, maybe. So they wanted me to get interviewed, but the tape hadn't come out yet. And we all knew that it had happened. There was newspaper stories, but there was no footage released or anything. ABC had the tape.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I said, look, I'll do it, but if you could put the screen over me and change my voice or something like that. I got kids in school, grandkids in school. That gets out. I know how kids can be with other kids,
Yeah.
It's going to be rough for them. So, and I was just scared, wow, this is really, really upsetting, in every way. So I said, I'll do this, but I'm not going to talk about my own kids' experience because that's their story to tell, not mine. I will answer questions about the group and so on and so forth, and give you the background piece to, in any way that I can help.
Sure.
And so I went they had a hotel room set up in Boston, with lights and all that kind of stuff. But before doing the interview, he said, I have a tape to show you, and he hit play. And, God, I'm just utter, completely shocked. I was a mess of just tears and snot. Couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't talk. I was just so upset, thinking about Ricky and all the kids that face the same type of emotional challenges that he did. Maybe not to the same extent. Maybe they are. Who knows? I'm not sure. I don't know everybody's experience, but it's personally upsetting, but more so because I know that I played a role in this group getting as far as it had, for so many years. And I'm, responsible to some extent for all the shit that's happening, with all the second generation kids. So that became, a real difficult reality to deal with in my everyday life. Thankfully, they never aired the clip, of me in the interview, because I was completely, I think I was just too snot covered to use on TV. So they went a different way, which I was grateful for. But yes, that's the biggest thing for the last, from probably 1995, once we had kind of got educated about what had happened to us and we began to see clearly and get some cult insights, until the present day. I mean, I got grandkids, they weren't even a twinkle in my son's eyes yet, that are affected in the bang-on repercussions.
Really?
Well, they hear the stories, and that, that makes it a little hard to feel the same about grandma and grandpa, because, my kids actually understand it better than some of my grandkids, just simply because
of course.
My kids understood,
right.
how this happened, that it wasn't, Dad didn't dream this thing up. Yeah, well, that's my story.
Wow, man. And this Ricky guy, that we were just talking about, he was proclaimed by Berg to be like the next Messiah or something like that.
He would be the prince. Once Berg died, which he was prophesying that he was going to die soon, that I think the doctrine that they came up with, that Ricky and his mother would be the two end-time prophets in the Bible, in the book of Revelation. So that was a lot of pressure put on a kid. Christian is a tricky word.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's supposed to mean a follower of Jesus, but I don't think it does anymore.
Why?
Because it's become something else. It's become a political movement.
62 to 69% of U.S. adults identify as Christian. Wow.
You think it's becoming political?
Yeah. I mean, you can't read the Sermon on the Mount and say this goes along with, I don't know if I should get political on a podcast, but
podcasts are born to be made to be political.
Yeah.
There's no boundaries.
It's unrecognizable. You read the words of Jesus and then you see what's happening in Chicago or in North Carolina, and it's just crazy. It's just, this is absolutely not what Jesus said.
Yeah.
You're supposed to love the stranger. You're supposed to help the stranger. You're not supposed to beat him up, throw him in the back of a van. But all these.
What do you make of the push to make the government more Christian? I think,
I think
Trump appointed a Christian. What was the title of that woman? She was like the head of Christianity.
Paula White.
Yeah.
Tampa girl.
Some of the videos of that lady are wild.
Yeah, it's a little strange.
And so, like, what do you make of the push to merge that televangelism with politics?
Well, that would be a really good and an interesting podcast. What happened, interestingly, was the Jesus movement gave a real jolt of energy to the flagging evangelical church. So a whole lot of young people came into the church with a lot of enthusiasm and zeal, eventually got into Bible college, became pastors and whatnot. And it was just kind of religious. It wasn't a political movement. And then Jerry Falwell realized that the political potential that it would wield. So they started with the abortion issue. There's a guy named Frankie Schaeffer. I don't know if you ever heard of him. His father, Francis Schaeffer, was a well-known, he lived in Switzerland, he's American, scholar of religion and wrote some really important books in theology. His son kind of grew up kind of like my kids, somewhat neglected because daddy was off serving the Lord. and he ended up getting polio. He didn't learn to read until he was about 13. But his dad gave him the mission to go and teach the American church the importance of the pro-life movement. And so he came over here and networked with all these denominational leaders and so on, and got them really sold. I mean, Billy Graham never talked about abortion. It wasn't even an issue. I mean, it was just not a thing. All of a sudden in 1980, 1985, it's the only thing the Bible's supposed to be about. Jesus never even used the word, Right. So it just became, and then the gay thing. And they just will take these issues and politicize them. I suppose they have some moral principle to them. I don't agree with it, but it's in their mind a moral principle. But it's a tremendous fundraising tool, and they organize. And because you have the microphone every Sunday morning, you got pretty strong control over the thought lives of and it's all just like with us. It's in the name of God. Who's gonna say no if they think God wants them to? Hate gays or whatever. It's the same dynamic. It's just a matter. If you're a communal group, it gets real bizarre real fast. If you're not a communal group, it takes a while. But over a decade and a half, America was changed by this whole evangelical movement, given life by the Jesus movement. No political message there at all. And then from 1980 on or so, the moral majority, and then and Frankie Shaver details exactly how they did it and managed to win over the evangelical world to this political worldview.
Interesting.
So it is interesting, and it's affecting our lives right now. I don't know if you're familiar with the Seven Mountains, that whole thing.
What's that?
It's a movement, the National Apostolic Reformation or something, the New Apostolic Reformation, NAR. They have this teaching that there's 7 mountains that are places of influence in society: politics, entertainment. I don't know. I can't even think of all of them they are, but they're all parts of society, business, and their idea is that God wants us to be on the top of all these 7 mountains so we can change society in all its dimensions. So that's why they work so hard to capture positions in other parts of the society that have nothing to do with religion.
Who is trying to capture?
What's the name of that church? There's a big church, Bethel Church out in California with it's kind of the launch pad for this whole 7 Mountains movement. And they are committed to it. They don't make any bones. They don't hide it. It'd be published in Charisma magazine. They teach it as this is what we should do. Whereas Jesus said, no, my kingdom is not of this world. I'm not trying to take over Rome. I don't want any part of Rome. We've got our own kingdom.
Yeah.
So let's do our kingdom stuff, which is love, which is care for the poor, which is
Also, there's been, I don't know if you've read about this, but there's been this huge push over the last few years to transform Silicon Valley into like a religious Christian hub.
I've heard that.
And Peter Thiel is one of the big people behind that. He's doing these big conferences in Silicon Valley. There's even a big church that got started there, where Silicon Valley historically has been like an atheist part, an atheist hub. All the tech people, they're not religious, they're not godly, and that's been completely transformed.
You think psychedelics might have something to do with that too?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's funny though that's also like the psychedelic hub of the world.
I wonder if there was some
America. But no, Peter Thiel is like onto this jihad to paint Christianity onto everything Silicon Valley is doing. And he's holding these seminars all about the Antichrist. And he thinks that AI is or technology, and he's a guy who's invested in lots of AI and tech companies and companies like Palantir, which is a surveillance company that sells surveillance software to the CIA and creates autonomous weapons systems for they sell to other countries to essentially just kill people.
Yeah. It's a pretty weird combination.
And yeah, right. And this is a Vanity Fair article. Yeah. Christianity was borderline illegal in Silicon Valley, and now it's the new religion. And
there is this whole.
It's odd. It's very odd. And I've been racking my brain trying to think, like, what is this? Is this something that this guy really believes is the right thing? Is something? Does he really believe this?
I don't know.
Or does he have a motive behind this? Is there some sort of motive? Does he think that America would be stronger if American society would be stronger if everyone subscribed to Christianity? If we had a one binding thing where we were all Christians and we were all people of the Lord, similar to how other countries, if you look at other like Muslim countries, they're so devout to their religion that they're willing to strap a bomb to their chest.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're not like that. We're more devout. We're a little bit more segregated, a little bit more diverse.
Yeah, but I think there is a push. It's weird because it is two completely different Jesuses that are. I was starting to talk about deconstruction because what happened with the evangelical movement is the kids who were raised in the 80s and 90s in these strict evangelical environments, homeschooled, stuff like that. They and purity culture, all of no dating, all that kind of thing. They're now, they get into their 20s and go, I don't think I really agree with this anymore. And they start, but they still have a spiritual life. They still have a prayer life. And they start to take it apart. They deconstruct it. What is and what isn't connected to this Jesus? And that is having a big movement on the other end. You got these guys going total in one direction, you know, the God of war. And the other ones are kind of like, wait, we have to be able to understand Jesus's ethic in terms of our own social experience. So Jesus didn't talk about homosexuality. He didn't talk about it wasn't an issue. You can't go to the verses, and a few people do, but they're incorrect. But nonetheless, people are beginning to go, it's just not, I can't picture Jesus saying, mocking people for having a different sexual preference. It doesn't make sense. Yet this other Jesus, let's just, segregate them off from society.
Yeah.
So there's two, it's a war, it's,
it's just people, it's groups. It's groupthink, and it's people in society with lots of power who want to use things like this, like religion or Christianity, to achieve whatever their goals are. It seems like there's people that just want to use it to their advantage, however they can, and that's not just with religion. That's that's even with psychedelics, psychedelic drugs. Absolutely. Given the right set of circumstances, pretty much anybody could end up in a situation that is cultic or manipulative or, the military, think of all the things that people do in the military. They didn't, join the army to burn villagers in Vietnam, but they did, so what happened? They got psychologically programmed to a place where they were willing to do that. But you can't, and guys do have a hard time. They can't come back from that. They have a hard time being able to forgive themselves for what happened, if they can unpack it and understand it. And it's also so similar, too. If you think about, especially if you want to go back to the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan, the type of people that signed up to do that, they were young kids that were not like growing up saying, I want to grow up and I want to go into combat and I want to fight for America and I want to go to war. Like, this was not something that was like in their DNA. It wasn't a calling that they had, right? These people were and I've talked to a lot of them, these combat veterans. They were really young. They didn't know what direction they wanted to go in life. They maybe had a few options on the table. Maybe I'll go to college. Maybe I'll try to get a job doing this, learn a trade or whatever, or maybe I could go sign up for the military and I can go off to war. And for one reason or another, they picked war. And their brains were not built for that.
Yeah.
They were not psychologically ready to witness that kind of stuff and be in combat, pulling the trigger, killing people, killing kids. And they come back and there's nothing left for them. And they're broken when they get back here.
I actually think that it's interesting because Bob, the fellow at Meadowhaven, he had suggested early on, I knew very little about trauma. It was like maybe 1994, 95. And I was kind of, once I got a little cult education in me, then I realized what kind of challenges my kids were up against, and I was getting a little freaked out. Like, trauma changes your brain. I mean, these kids grew up, even if you left the sex stuff out, it was still a traumatic situation. People had way too much power over their lives. And it was, abusive. There's no question about it. So
what could be more abusive than sexual abuse? I don't know.
No, it was probably not. Sex gets, right into the core of our being.
Right,
so,
exactly.
And that, especially for a kid who has no mental equipment to deal with that.
Right.
But my point is just that if soldiers coming back from, I'm not sure if it was in Rebecca's book where they talk about moral injury, where you're it's not that you just experienced horrible stuff, your friends getting blown up and this and that, it's that you pulled the trigger, that you did something that you knew deep down on some level, you killed a young boy. Yeah, exactly. And it's I think a piece of he gave me a book to read, Trauma and Healing by Judith Herman. It was one of the earliest books written on trauma. And I was surprised to find out it was only 1980 they came up with the term trauma related to Vietnam vets. It was their rap sessions where they started to unpack what had happened to them, and they began to realize they came up with the term trauma for it. At the same time, the women's liberation movement was coming up with all the stories of women who had been subject to all kinds of abuse, and they were traumatized. And then they started to put two and two together and realize this is a kind of a constant in human history and human experience, that when you get traumatized, you have to somehow go back and revisit how this happened, confess to whatever weakness you might have had in the situation, but also absolve yourself that, look, something happened to you, man. You didn't dream this up. This is not your fault. It's you can't not take any responsibility for it. It's good that you take responsibility for it. Nobody should walk away after war without some issues, but you have to get to a place where you can let go. You can get that trauma to a healed place. I hope that message gets out more and more. The psychological research on trauma is just flooding the world today.
What is the best way to do it? What is the best way to face it?
Well,
and to work through it.
In my opinion, from a cultic point of view, it was this educational piece of how did these small decisions along the way, which in their own, this choice wasn't all that bad, this choice wasn't all that bad, this choice, but all of a sudden, holy shit, where are we? And that's, I think, pretty much what happens to soldiers too. They get caught up in this weird world. I just visited an old friend. He went to Vietnam when he was 16, lied about his age.
Wow, because he wanted to go?
He wanted to go. He came home in, rough shape, full disability. It's he still struggles with it. It still will come to him, even though he's done a lot of work to try and process it all. He still carries it. When he talks about it, you can see it in his face. It's real, and it's still a burden for him. Thank God he's learned how to live beyond that. But yeah, I hope, that's why I got involved with Meadowhaven for so long, was because I thought it did a good job of trying to give people a chance to unpack it rather than just shove it down and forget about it. And, it's going to pop up somewhere at an unfortunate moment.
Can you spot this kind of stuff, like in other parts of society, like where
Yeah,
like
you know,
cultish behaviors bubbling up, and you
in the religious world, it's becoming more and more widely well known how much abuse goes on in churches, not just sexual abuse,
historically,
but, yeah, the manipulation to get people to do all kinds of crazy stuff.
right? I mean,
away
there's
fortunes.
nothing. It's crazy that there's nothing else that's more synonymous with child abuse than the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
And cults that use that stuff.
yeah, and now it's coming out. It's not just the Catholics. It's pretty much every doggone denomination has a closet full. But it is something that, especially now, because people are you familiar with the term deconstruction in the evangelical world?
No.
Well, there's, I don't know the statistics, but a pretty large percentage of our society over the last 20, 30 years was evangelical. Witness our political situation, but
A large say that again?
American society, I think maybe 20 or 30% are Catholic, 20 or 30% are mainstream Protestants, 20 or 30% are charismatic and evangelical and fundamentalist.